Welcome back, everyone. Remember last summer, that startling press conference when the governor of South Carolina, Mark Sanford, came back from Argentina, supposedly having seen, or realistically having seen, his lover there? Well, many people felt very sorry for the First Lady of South Carolina at the time, Jenny Sanford, for having to endure that.
We thought he was on the Appalachian Trail.
Yes, and it was a huge news story, as we all know. Well, now, 9 months later, she has left her husband, and she's written a new book. And I had the opportunity to sit down with her to get her take. Well, Jenny, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it. You know, as I read the book, you strike me as a really private person.
Oh, yes, incredibly.
And I was wondering what or how difficult the decision was to decide to put this whole story down in a book.
You know, it's funny, I didn't make the decision to make the whole affair public. I mean, that was Mark's choice when he came back from Argentina, and then the emails on the website and all. So I found myself being thrust, well, first into the public world anyway when my husband was a governor. So over time I became a little bit less private. But then all of a sudden this past summer, I was just thrust into the public light. And had that not been made public at all, I would never have written a book.
I have to say, when I was reading it, and I kept looking back to see that the title of Staying True, I have to say that I found myself thinking, instead of Staying True, a more apt title might have been Jenny's Sacrifice. It just seemed so much throughout this book that you were constantly sacrificing.
You know, you can look at it that way, but I didn't look at it that way. I've long believed that marriage and family actually are very important in this world, and that if you marry, you take it seriously. I have kind of an old-fashioned view of marriage, and always have.
Mm-hmm.
So I was happy to support my husband in whatever way I could.
One of the things that you were early on was an incredibly successful investment banker.
Right.
At a young age, a female partner, right. Pretty much unheard of.
Well, vice president, yeah.
Vice president,
yeah.
Top of the line in investment banking. It seems to me when I read the book that it really wasn't that tough of a decision for you to leave that behind.
No, you know, it was a very intense job, and I loved every minute of it, but I didn't have children at the time, and I wasn't married for most of the time I was on Wall Street, and I loved it, but I always yearned for a more stable, more balanced life. Especially during the child rearing stage, if you will. And I never looked at it as throwing a career away. I looked at it as putting some of those talents on hold.
Mm-hmm. So you say that you had a belief of marriage in an old-fashioned sort of way.
Right.
And so you moved to South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And yet a lot of these signs seem to appear almost immediately, even before you were married, that maybe Mark Sanford wasn't in this marriage as you thought he might have been originally. The warning signs of the vows. I know much has been made of the fact that he didn't want to sign this, you know, he did not want to say the vow about faithfulness.
Right. What came after he brought that up was a very honest discussion, I thought, about what marriage is. And I said, marriage is a vow of fidelity. It doesn't matter what words you speak. I said, if you're more comfortable speaking a certain vow off this, you know, menu of vows, that you can pick whichever one you want. I said, but marriage is a vow of fidelity. If you're not vowing in the act of getting married to stay true to me and to be faithful to me, then let's not get married. And he said, oh, no, I absolutely am.
But I think a lot of women who read this book, and men for that matter, will say, wow, you put up with a lot on top of that. For example, not only did he say that about the vows, but he was also notoriously cheap. Mm-hmm. I mean, these stories about giving you a diamond necklace and then taking it away?
Mm-hmm. I thought the way he delivered the diamond necklace with the little scavenger hunt. My kids were little, and they loved it. We had more fun. It was clever. It was thoughtful, and you know, isn't that what you want? You want somebody really to think about you. Now he was up in D.C. He had called and ordered the necklace, so he hadn't seen it, and so in his mind, whatever he spent on that necklace, he obviously had envisioned in his mind something much bigger. And just by the look on his face when he saw it, he said, "That's what I spent that money on." I could never have kept it afterwards because it would have just pained him. I mean, it literally pains him to spend money.
But what about forgetting your birthday?
Well, yeah, you know, he remembers it now because it's September 11th, but, you know, he was busy.
Technically, she's still First Lady of South Carolina, right?
Technically, and technically you could argue that she's still defending her husband tremendously.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I got.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's an amazing situation. I find her a dichotomy that she, on the one hand, is such a private person but wrote this tell-all book, yeah. And on the one hand has left her husband but still continues to defend him. One could argue that that's for her 4